Frog fishing might be the most exciting way to catch bass, and while it's a very beginner-friendly technique, today I want to show you some additional frog fishing tricks to catch even more bass while you're out there using this bait. So stay tuned and you'll be catching more bass in no time. So the first tip when it comes to frog fishing is actually going to come down to your gear. This is very important. You don't have to use exactly the setup we're going to talk about here today, but I would highly recommend getting a frog-specific setup to get these fish out of the cover, which we'll show you here in just a little bit when we're actually out there fishing with the bait. It's going to be very important to actually have heavy enough gear to pull these fish through and get them out. They're going to bite it hard, turn and get you in the cover, and you're going to need to get them back out. So I'm going to be using the Cash and Element Frog Series rod right here. This is a 7.3 heavy fast action. Basically your standard jig rod is what you're going to want to use here. So a 7.3 7-foot heavy fast action is what you're going to want. The fast action is going to give you the tip to make good accurate casts under these bushes and around these logs, but that heavy backbone is going to be able to land those fish, get these hooks through the bait. That's going to be the most important thing. If you're actually losing fish on the hook set when you're frog fishing, more often than not, it's not that you're not letting them get the bait and waiting long enough. It's that you don't have a heavy enough rod to actually depress these hooks and get those through a fish's mouth whenever they bite it. So the heavy action rod, if you're having trouble landing fish and you set the hook and they always come off like after a turn or two of the reel handle, try a heavier rod and see if that will help. The other thing that will help would be using braided line. So I use 65-pound test braid here. You almost always want to use braided line with a frog. I wouldn't even recommend using anything else, but I used to fish with like 30-pound braid because I thought 65-pound was way too heavy. That heavy braid is going to have limited stretch and it's going to be super abrasion resistant and cut through grass, be able to get them out of wood, whatever you might have them in, bushes, pull those fish out of cover and get them coming towards you and into the boat. So 65-pound test braid, it seems crazy, it seems heavy, but it's going to help you land more fish. So that little combo right there is going to help you get the hooks in the fish's mouth and land it into the boat a lot better. And then I have a 7:4:1 Corrado MGL on here. At higher gear ratio, when these fish bite it, they hit it hard, they might come right at you, they might go different directions. You need to reel that bait in as fast as possible and stay pegged with these fish and have tension on them at all times. The other reason for the high gear ratio is so that when you can make a cast, you can work your bait in the cover and then reel it back out and make another cast really fast. So you can cover a lot more water with that faster gear ratio. So that's the setup right there for the rod and reel. And then when it comes to the frogs, I got a couple here that we've been playing around with today. We use the Booyah Pad Crasher a little bit, and then we use the 6th Sense Vega frog. You'll notice both of these, the only thing I care about is the belly color. So white or black. Those are the only two colors that I really keep in my box. Whatever's on the back, I don't really care about. Sometimes I'll use ones that have high vis on the back so I can see them a little bit better, especially up in these shade pockets. That's actually why I went to this green one here. We were using the black one, using the popping frog, trying to get them to come up and bite it. They weren't really committing very well. I think it was too dark under there, and then having that dark belly, they just weren't able to see contrast. So I went to a lighter belly so they could contrast it against the dark background. And then I went to the lime green top so that I could see it to make sure those fish were getting the bait and setting the hook properly. They also kind of shut down a little bit. They're biting a little bit slower now. So we went from the popping frog, trying to get them to bite that and get that action, down to a regular frog, just a little bit calmer movement in the water. These walk a little bit better in place. I've been fishing it up here tight to the bank here, so I want my frog to stay in place and get those fish to come and eat it. So I went with the regular frog instead. So those are the two we've been using. All the gear will be linked in the description below. If you want to use my code Quince on the 6th Sense website, you can save 10% off of that, and it helps me out a ton. And everything else will be linked down there too if you want to check out any of the items down below. But for now, let's head out on the water and see if we can catch us some fish and go through tips number 2 and 3 to catch even more fish on a frog. Now, my second tip when fishing with a frog to catch more fish is going to be alter your retrieve style. And what I mean by that is I have two forms of retrieve. If I'm searching for fish and I'm trying to cover some water, I'm gonna work my frog quickly like this and literally just hop it forward, cover that water all the way back to me. I'm gonna reel it back in and make new casts once I get out away from the cover. But when I get in an area like this, I have some shade, I have some trees in front of me, I'm actually gonna throw my bait in there and I'll kind of work it in place a little bit slower, especially around those key pieces of cover, to see if I can entice one of those fish to come up and bite. And sometimes that will get you more bites than if you're just working a frog like you regularly would. Now, the reason I do this is because It allows me to cover water and find fish because you might not always be right where the fish are. But when I get in a key area, if I know there's fish in that area or I catch one working it really quickly, I'll slow down and fish through that area a little bit more thorough. So like right now, I'm still in search mode. I'm gonna keep working this thing and I'm gonna cover some water all through these trees until I can just get one to come up and bite it. They don't even have to get hooked. I just need to know there's some fish in the area because you can cover a lot of lake and never run into a fish. So right now I'm gonna work it pretty quickly. And then if I get near a key piece of cover, I will slow it down and let it sit there for a second, but I'm not really gonna sit too long in one area. So let's cover some water and see what we can find. Got that one. Oh, there we go. Finally got us one. We've been covering water, working that frog quickly, and not really catching any. And then I saw that log right there. It sticks out. There's another log right back there. I skipped underneath it and kind of walked it in place, and she came up and grabbed it. So that's the first one. Let's see if we can get us some more while we work on to tip number 3 here. All right, tip number 3 for you guys. If you'll notice, there's not one blade of grass out in front of me here. The frog is way more useful than just grass fishing. I've actually caught more fish fishing it around wood than probably grass. And it's just an excellent bait for a few reasons. One, you can see this log, there is a little cut back in there. There could be a fish. We're gonna try it. Any other bait, you cannot do what I just did right there. I literally threw it. See if I can hear the blow up because I can't see my frog. No blow up. But you can see that frog come straight over that wood. I hooked that fish right there with 65-pound braid. I can winch it right out. I don't have to worry about that fish coming off or anything like that. It's an excellent wood bait. I'm literally throwing this on land. I'm not even worried about getting an accurate cast. I'm making it look like a frog jumping in off the bank. I'm throwing it on the shore and I'm hopping it back into the water. But I'm actually not mimicking frogs. I'm sure these bass probably do eat frogs, but what I'm trying to mimic is bluegill that are sitting up there against the bank under this shade in here, trying to find a safe place to hide, and these bass ambush them. They'll come down the bank and look for a bait and stuff like that, and then they'll come up and run up and destroy these bait fish. And they're thinking this frog is the same thing. It has a bluegillish profile to it, because of the shape of it. Yes, it does look like a frog too, and it is made to imitate a frog, but a lot of those bluegills are wide and flat and they'll sit up on top of the water. So you can make this look like an injured bluegill that's already been hit by a bass, or when you're working it quickly, just like a bluegill running away from a bass. It can mimic a lot of different forage that these bass are feeding on, especially fishing around all this wood. And there's not a lot of baits I can fish through up there. It's so thick that I'm gonna get snagged every single time throwing pretty much anything else. So we're gonna keep throwing this frog and see if we can catch us some more up underneath some of these shade pockets that are coming up here. But next time you're fishing with a frog, make sure you remember you don't have to just fish lily pads and grass with it. It can be more than just that. You'll notice now what I'm gonna mix in with tip number 2 into tip number 3. Since I have caught that one fish and he was tucked way back in that wood there, what I'm actually gonna do now fishing this, instead of working it quickly, I'm gonna skip it way up to the bank, get it as close as I can, and you can see I'm gonna walk that frog in place and try and get one to come up and bite it. And then once I get it out from the cover, I'll work it out a little bit further just to see if there's any roaming. And then once I hit the edge of that shade line, I'll go ahead and bring it back. So skip it way under there. I'm in the target zone. I'm gonna work it in place. We're gonna see if we can get one to come up and get it. But that's all we're gonna do. We're just gonna walk it in place, try and get one to commit right off the bank there, and then I'll speed it up a little bit and work it back to the boat. Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! Wow! Wow! He wanted all of that. Oh my gosh. Look at that. That frog is gone. That was the most vicious frog bite ever. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video talking about some frog fishing tips to help you catch even more bass just like this one right here. And if you did, check out this video right here. One of my bonus tips is to throw a follow-up bait if you ever miss fish. Like if they do blow up, they miss the frog entirely. Throw a follow-up bait in there, you'll catch those fish a lot of the times, and this is my favorite one right here. So check that video out, hit the subscribe button down below. Thanks for watching. That's a sweet fish. That was a sweet blow up.